So today is dog food production day, both wet and dry. So I thought I'd give you guys a little bit of a tutorial, so to speak, as to what I do. So this is basically what I start out with. I make 2 dry kits. So what I sent you guys in the bag is basically this, but I make up my kits in these old jars, and I use 2 slow cookers. You'll need lots of water. Today I'm using pumpkin, but you can use any squash, or I like squash because the seeds have a different profile than the flesh. They have lots of protein, and you're going to need a good blender and lots of water. So this is basically how we get started. I'm going to move on to the next step, and I'll film that for you guys. So this is the next step. I've taken half the squash. I've taken the skin off because this is a winter squash, and you really don't want to use the skin of a winter squash. It's not very edible for dogs. And I put a quarter of the squash in each slow cooker. So you can see I've poured the mix in and put a quarter of the squash chopped up in there. I've also put in 3/4 of a cup of oil. So I'm not sure if you guys have oil, but you are going to need it for homemade dog food, just because dogs don't really process oil in the same way that humans do. It's okay for them, and the oil helps add a lot of calories and fat that they need in their diet. So I always add about 3/4 of a cup of oil to each batch. And that's the next step, and I'll do a video of the next step. So this is step number 3. You're going to need a nice big measuring cup. That's for the dry dog food, but it all sort of plays into each other. That's why I do it all at once. So I've taken the other half of the pumpkin, and I've placed it in my blender along with about 1 liter of water. So I have a little bit more pumpkin here than I normally have, so it's about equal parts water to whatever squash you're using. And we're just gonna blend that up and move on to the next step. So as you can see, I've blended it all up, and I've taken out 6 cups of the mix. So I need 6 cups to make the dry. That's what I use to make the dry. But as you can see, the container is still got quite a bit in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse that out with water and put that in the dry dog food, just so I'm not wasting any of that pulp. And then into the dry, I have added some rosemary. So we've got lots of rosemary in our garden, so I dehydrate it. Dogs love rosemary. I'm not really sure why. It doesn't really work fresh because it's like little needles, right? And they can't really digest it, like they can't chew it because their teeth are a little bit different. They don't really have grinding teeth, and so I dehydrate it and blend it up. So if you're gonna add rosemary, just either get dry rosemary or dehydrate your own. And I also have liquid smoke. I don't use it all the time because it's not really a health food for dogs. It is kind of, it's a chemical, but they do like it. So every now and then I will add a little bit in. I haven't done it the last few times, so I am going to add it this time. But I would, if you are going to use it, I would use it sparingly. Like, don't use it in every batch. Just sort of, it gives them a bit of a treat every so often. And then I'm going to fill these with what's mixed out of the blender, and I fill it to about, 1 inch from the top. And I'll be back with the next step. So here they are, good to go, filled with water. So I cook them on high for about the first 4 hours, and then I put it on low. It does take all day in the slow cooker. I used to do it in the IP, but it would always go to burn. So I stopped doing that. I started using slow cookers. You could try in the IP if you want. It's the exact same thing, only you use the IP. But I do find that because of the quantity of dry goods that's in the IP just can't handle it. A bigger one is better, but I even found it still did it with the 8 quart. So I moved over to using slow cookers. So in terms of what you put in it, I used squash this time, pumpkin, because I got a pumpkin free from our local farm because it was on its way out. It wasn't sellable, which is perfect for my dogs because it has a little bit more flavor the older it is. But you can use anything. You can use potatoes, carrots, beets. I would avoid anything like broccoli or cauliflower because it gets a little bit smelly sitting in your fridge. So I tend to stick with the root vegetables, work better in there. But like peas, carrots, I don't use onion or garlic. You get mixed messages about those things, so it's best to just avoid those sorts of things. So yeah, you can put whatever you want in there. I've even thrown leftovers in their dog food, which reminds me is I have some kefir in my fridge that has been sitting for a while. Right here, it's cashew kefir. I made it after I made my cheese last time, so I'm actually going to use that today too. I'll add that in. So yeah, it's a great way to sort of get rid of leftovers, or any old vegetable broth that you have sitting around, any old vegetables that you don't really want to eat that dogs are more than willing to chow down on because they're scavengers, right? They'll eat basically anything. And the dry is good to go, or the wet is good to go. And now I'm going to move on to doing my dry, and I'll document that too. I didn't send you any dry kit stuff. I did just send you a sample of the dry, but I'll in the next video show you how to make that stuff. Okay, the dry is good because it's for their teeth more than anything. It's not really nutritional in much of the sense. Like they're not getting a lot of their nutrition from the dry, but it helps to keep their teeth healthy. So that's why I started making dry. Okay. So I just want to put a quick note in here. Another reason I like to use slow cookers is because, as you know, us vegans spend the majority of our day cooking, preparing, and doing stuff. And I've just mixed up a batch of lentil batter because I make lentil waffles because I'm also gluten-free. And then I end up with a carafe full of little bits of ground up lentils, and I hate to waste anything. So I blend it up and I put it in the wet dog food. So that's another reason I like to use the slow cookers, because throughout the day I can sort of add this sort of thing to it, my poor dogs. Anyway, like I said, as you know, most vegans spend the majority of their day preparing food of some sort, and having a slow cooker going to add these sorts of things to is kind of a bonus. Anyway, just a little tip. So these have been on for about 3 hours now, and as you can see, it's bubbling. So what I usually do is this is when I will turn it down. So right now it's on high. I'll just turn it down to low and let it go for probably another 3 hours. Depending on even the temperature outside or how much water's in there, because not every kit is exact, it may change your cooking times. So yeah, I just wait till it's like at this stage, and then that's when I turn it down. Okay, so the dog food is all ready, as you can see. And what we do is we blend up just half of it, because beans are really gassy for dogs, and breaking it down like this helps to reduce the gas with the dogs. They can be very farty otherwise. So then we're going to pour it into pans, but we'll do the blending first. So we're going to do each of them and then pour.
Prepare to be amazed. So exciting.
Okay, so now all the dog food has been blended up. Well, not all of it. Half of it has been blended up. So now we pour it into roasting pans.
Begin to pour.
So it helps if you have a friend or somebody to do this with you. You can do it alone. It'll just take you longer. But I have Gary, and I'm lucky enough that he likes to help. So there we go. And that's it. All done. So the next step with this is put it in the freezer. And the reason I put it in the freezer is because it changes the texture. It makes it a little bit better. I'm not really sure what it does. I think it's the oatmeal or something. Anyway, so we freeze it, and then when we're ready to feed it to the dogs, we take it out. You could alternately put it in and then halfway through freezing, like score your portion sizes, and then feed it to them frozen if you want. But our dogs are sissies that way. They prefer to have their food thawed. So that's it. That is Guarden Dog.
You should show them what's happening right here.
And one quick video. Oh, so Duck gets the remnants. Like I remember I told you, nothing goes to waste. So there's Duck licking the bowl clean. Right, Ducka? We give Scout some too, but she's a lady, so she has to have it on a plate. Anyway, so that's the end of the wet, and I'll show you the end of the dry tomorrow. So now I'm going to move on to the dry. I use bread makers to do my dry, but just to make the dough. I don't cook it all the way through to bread. I just use it to get the dough mixed. But you could use any mixer. You can even do this part by hand. So it's a teaspoon of yeast, a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of pea protein, 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, and a tablespoon of peanut butter powder or peanut butter. You can also add in other stuff, like if you want to put a bit of cinnamon in there to give it a bit more flavor, or maybe some sesame seeds, something like that. Like I said, the majority of this is just for healthy teeth. So you can add flavoring and to make it taste good and palatable for them, make it more like a treat, because I use it for treats as well, not just dry. And there's our mix from the blender, and we're going to use oil as well again. A couple of tablespoons of oil in each, and we're going to use flour, which I'll show you in a minute, but it's 5 cups of flour. I use 4 whole wheat and 1 regular unbleached white. So when I get to the next step, I'll show you. So I've added in all the ingredients into the bread pans. I forgot to mention, don't put your salt in at the same time as you put your yeast in, because the salt will affect the yeast activating. So I always put the salt in very last after I've added everything else. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my 3 cups of the pulp that I had blended from the pumpkin. So there's 6 cups in here, so it's 3 cups in each. I would recommend that you put your 1 cup of flour in, and then your 3 cups of liquid, and then your whole wheat. It kind of mixes better if the liquid is on the bottom, and then once you add your whole wheat, then put in your teaspoon of salt. I did also add some brown sugar in here. I wouldn't use refined sugar. It just helps with the flavoring a bit. Again, that's optional. Dogs will pretty much eat anything you put in front of them if they're hungry enough. But my dogs do tend to like the sweet and salt in their treats. So I'll get this all put in the pans, and then I'll make another video. So I've put the pans in the bread makers, and I've set the setting to dough. So we're just gonna start it up. Oh, and I keep a little bit of water and flour nearby, and just keep an eye on it just to make sure, because sometimes if your measurements are off even just a little bit, it'll either be too wet or too dry. So I just sort of keep an eye on it as it's mixing, and if I need to sort of adjust, then I've got things nearby that I can adjust with. So we're just gonna start this. And let it go. And then when that's all mixed, I'll show you what comes next. And so there we go. So those will sit now for about an hour and a half, and they'll rise and They just look like bread dough, really, and I'll show you what I do next. So as you can see, the bread maker is almost done. It's got another 10 minutes, but this is how it should look at the end of the cycle. So I've got my pans. I have 10 flat cookie sheets with parchment paper ready to go. My rolling pan, and I use a pizza cutter, and a little bit of white flour to help with rolling. And of course we are lucky enough to own this wonderful Subway oven. So I have that turned on to about 450 degrees, getting ready. Okay, next step coming soon. So hi, you get to look at my face. It's not pretty in the morning. So this has just come out of the bread maker. So as you can see, it's just one lump of dough. And so what I do is I cut it into 4 pieces, like that. So you just get 4 equal pieces, and I have my flour nearby. And then I'm gonna roll this piece out. So I roll it out right flat, and then I cut it into pieces. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So I've rolled it out really flat, like really flat as you can go, without it sticking to the table. And then what I do is I take a piece of parchment and I put it on the parchment paper. Comme ça. And then I just cut the excess off. And then all I do is I use my pizza cutter. So you can use one like this, or you can use the rolly kind, or just a knife or whatever. And then I just cut it into the size that I want. These I just do like, 1 inch square or half an inch square. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just enough to make it like bite size. And go the other way. Like, you could use cookie cutters, I guess, but like I tried all sorts of fun stuff, but then it just got down to, you know what, the dogs don't really care what shape it is or what size it is. That's all for humans, right? And then I take my cookie sheet, and that's 1 tray done. So I just do all of those, and then I bake them about 10 minutes at 450. And then let them cool, and then I put them in my dehydrator. But I'll show you all that when I get to it. So the dry dog food is all done, and that's basically what it should look like. It's still a little soft, which is why I dehydrate. So I have a dehydrator, and I just put it on the sheet like that. I dehydrate it at about 125, 130. It really depends on how cooked it is. If you don't have a dehydrator, or if you don't have one like really big enough, you can do it in the oven, just on the very lowest setting. It's cooked right now, but we want it crunchy because that's what helps their teeth. So that's all I do. So I do it at about 130 for 24 hours, and then it comes out nice and crunchy. And I sent you some of the stuff that I make, so you'll see how crunchy it is. And then I just break it up, but I'll show you that tomorrow. I'll do another video when I'm breaking it all up, just to finish off the process. Okay, so this is the final step. All the dry is dehydrated, and I have a big plastic bag that I had some bulk stuff that I bought in, and I just use that. I just put the full sheets in on top of each other, and then I just break it all up while it's in the bag. So as you can see, it makes a lot, but I have 2 dogs that eat 2 cups of this a day, so a lot is what I need, or what they need. So then I just grab some coffee and break it all up. And then we've got a big bag of dry dog food. And
I do that every week, every Sunday, except for one. If I do it every Sunday, then I can take one Sunday off. But again, I have 2 dogs that eat twice a day. So if you've got 1 dog, then you could probably do it half as often, and you might even be able to do half as much. Instead of doing 2 slow cookers and 2 bread makers, you could just do the 1. I do 2 because I've got 2 dogs, so that's kind of why I do 2. But you could cut it down to accommodate your 1 dog. Anyway, that's it. That's all of it. That's my every Sunday, and that's my garden dog. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Good luck.
So here's my completed tray of dog food, and I'm about to feed the dogs. So I usually give them like about that much. Works out to be around a cup. I sometimes give them a bit more in the mornings because they're a little bit more hungry. And so you just scoop it out into whatever portions you want to give it out in, and that's about it. And like I said, this has been previously frozen and then thawed, and it just changes the texture a little bit. It just makes it a little bit more firm. I find that if you just serve it right from when it's cooked, it's kind of mushy, it's like more like mashed potatoes, whereas this is more like sort of, I don't know, it's more like what it looks like when it comes out of a can. So anyway, that's it. Well done. Dogs will be fed, happy. And that's all plant-based garden dog food.